Hello, hello! Here today on patch 0.8.11, the Christmas patch, in the freshly buffed Midway. Here to test out those changes, see if they made any difference. Anyhow, purebred tier 10 matchbreaking on Islands of Ice, updated epicenter, but we're a carrier, so that's going to be less impactful. So the main difference on 8.11 for the Midway is that her torpedo bombers got a slight buff, an alpha buff adjustment, bringing her torpedo damage per torpedo from just about 4,400 up to, I believe it was about a 20% buff, so it's about 5,200 per torpedo, which is actually quite substantial if you remember that she launches up to 6 torpedoes at once. Now, of course, you never hit all 6 torpedoes unless you're very lucky or the target's very large. So typically you'll be hitting between, let's say, 2 to 4 torpedoes on a well-aimed strike. So you're getting an increase in damage of about 1,600 to about 3,200 per torpedo strike. And if you can make about 2 passes on a target, that's an improvement in damage by about 6,400. So it's not a bad jump at all, but we'll get to that when we use the actual torpedo bombers. In the meantime, I'm scouting out the initial match of this tier 10 game with my destroyers. We do find a gearing. Turning in, I do clip a flag buff, however, as you'll note, and he's beside a Minotaur, but we still do have enough time to make one pass. Looks like he's running defensive fire. Get the reticle nice and tight on the rockets, but it's not a great approach angle. Nevertheless, going to zoom out and away from the gearing defensive fire and from the Minotaur's 6.9 kilometer flag. I will continue to scout out this side, but at this point, because it's a pure tier 10 game, I don't want to spend too much time here. Looking for a vulnerable target. My allies on the other side scout out the GK, so let's take a look at the torpedo bombers. So as you can see, he went from about 4,400 damage, jumping up to about 5,000 damage per torpedo. So slightly less than I said. Increasing about 600 rather than 800 damage, which is closer to 15%? Yeah, 15% damage increase. Nevertheless, it's an increase is an increase. I'm gonna look for a low A target where I can demonstrably hit all 6 of my targets. That GK that we spotted earlier that I mentioned will do nicely. Enemy hack. 2 GKs together though. And we do find a Shimakaze. Now the expected alpha on a battleship with low torpedo resistance, such as the GK prior to this, was about what was it, 4.4 by 6, 24,000 alpha before reduction. Oh, do clip that Shimakaze flak, unfortunately. So before the expected damage was about 2,400 pre-mitigation, or 24,000 pre-mitigation, which usually came out to about 18,000 to 16,000 depending on the target. Waiting to see if that first GK will crest the island. Looks like he's just sticking around there. I'm gonna go for that one out in the open. Lots of GKs out and about. Just circling. That GK's launched a spotter. Want to find the right approach angle. Looks like he's just reversing behind that rock. Thanks to the short arming distance of American torpedoes, I'm fairly certain I can hit this A ship GK, even though he's hovering just behind that rock. So, gonna arm out distance. Oh, there is a Henry IV in the way though, so he's gonna block 2 of those torpedoes, unless he, alright, he ultimate betrayal that GK, so we're gonna hit all 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We did 3,000 damage prior to that, so it was a 22,000 hit. So not bad at all. As I mentioned, usually you get about 2 strikes off onto any particular AA group. He's coming up from full speed, but he was pretty slow prior. Gonna relaunch with the Bearcats just to maximize my dot damage. Remember, we did get double flood on the first strike, another 6 strike hit, bringing us up to 47, just about 47,000, subtract 3,000 from the first rocket strike, 44,000, so about 22,000 per strike wave onto a GK. So, pretty marked improvement. Enemy hack launching and his torpedo bombers at my Smolensk. curious choice of target. That A ship GK that we targeted is now flooding. He's fighting it with a heal, but I'm here to finish the job. In case that flood doesn't tick him out. Also, he did get his damage control off at this point. So I'm gonna come and fly, make sure I finish the job. He does get ticked down, so I'm gonna switch over to this Henry IV. Now I'm quite close, so it's not an ideal strike. But I still do get a 7,000 chunk out of him. Midway is being Midway, of course. Again, usually you get 2 strikes over a target. Make use of that fast fighter refresh boost time. The Henry IV easily dispatches my Smolensk, being able to overmatch him all over. This time I get a very nice, perfect strike, as I get that bow on Midway Tiny Tim reticle onto him. Launching the HEDBs to follow up strike. We did take a fire, and he's pretty much sitting behind an island, which makes it very easy to hit the Henry IV. Now the Henry IV with defensive fire is actually a fairly thorny target. I'm gonna see if I can drop these two guys a fighter on the way, because the GK is fairly vulnerable to Hakuryu APDBs. As you can see in the chat, not really supporting the center right now. They do need a bit more help. Fighter should protect that Hakuryu, or that GK from the majority of the Hakuryu's wrath. It looks like it did F out with the majority of the squadron, however. I believe the Henry IV is still beached, so I'm gonna give this MBBR Henry IV a taste of his own HE medicine. Gonna see if I can get the reticles to stay pretty narrow. Couple too many maneuvers early on. Hit him with 3 bombs, only 3,000 damage, however. Some saturation mechanics going on over there, I guess. Gonna pop my engine cooling in order to expedite the rate of climb on this second and what will probably be the last attack onto him. Let the reticle get nice and narrow this time. 5 bomb hits, triple fire. Midway showing off her fire setting prowess. That of course does prompt a damage control, sadly, so it just ends up being fire. But again, we follow up with our fast squadron, and our next squadron use will probably be torpedo bomber onto that GK. I'm gonna bring my carrier hull up into the border to help contest the border so that Yamato and GK don't necessarily have to stay there. Again, in order to maximize burn time, come in at full speed with those super fast Bearcats, arming at 4 kilometers since he's basically not moving, so I don't have to jerk the reticle around. There's a double fire for you. Enjoy burning. Use the rest of that speed to pull out and away from the GK. Remember, my follow-up strike is likely going to be that GK, so let's dive out. Henry IV is taken out by GK. Nicely done. I was considering the GK, but since the Yuyang has so nicely decided to exit his smoke, no point not hitting him while we're here. Skim him with 1 rocket. It's not nothing. GK contesting the center means I will contest his life. He's nice and alone, so I'm gonna give him a bit of a hit. Up to a fairly conservative 110,000 damage total now. He's racing to get into cover, but I should be able to dispatch him quite easily, or hit him quite easily rather. I don't actually have the raw alpha. Remember, we did about 22,000 per strike last time, so I don't have the raw alpha to actually kill him, but as my team continues to take apart what's left of the enemy team, gonna wait for the fighter to tag me, then I will pop my heal. It pops on, so pop that heal as much long as possible to resist the damage effects. This time I hit 5 torpedoes. Taking my time to circle outward. Might be a bit too close, to be honest. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Should easily land all of those. Follow up with the HEDBs. And indeed, another perfect strike. Fairly tame. Torpedo bombers, as you can see, doing a bit more damage than before, but still not quite nearly as much a potency as the HEDBs, especially considering they don't flood as much as the bombs that fires. Rockets continuing to be my preferred follow-up ammunition type, and I just ditched this drop. I could have held onto them, but all our targets are quite distant anyway. I had a fairly conservative damage total from just farming battleships at this point. I'm going to pop engine cooling because this game's quickly wrapping up and I want to get onto that Conqueror. He's fighting the DPM of my Harugumo, who pens him all over with his 33mm of pen. Conqueror, of course, has 32mm of armor. Conqueror, of course, is a perfect HEDB target. The bombs have 67mm of penetration, or 63 actually. And he's covered in 32, which means he resists me nowhere except for the armored turrets. Do have to make sure I aim properly, hit him with 5 bombs, and that alpha damage is enough to strike him out. GK fairly healthy over there, so let's take over with another torpedo bomber squadron. Could go with the HEDBs, but it wouldn't be full alpha, although I guess I wouldn't need to make 4 passes over him anyway, which ends up being about 3 passes over a GK with low HP. There's that Yu Yang, but we launched torpedo bombers, we're not here for him. Continue to move my hull closer in case we do end up making a follow-up strike. GK cleans up my Montana. Gonna fly briefly over the Yu Yang. Adjust my angle. He'll know I'm coming for him, but he is the last battleship left anyway, so. Gonna just continue to demo the torpedo bombers against their best target, a big, clumsy battleship. He can mitigate my damage by turning in right now, but he's not going to be able to prevent it entirely, and once he turns in, my follow-up strike will be fairly elementary. You can see him turning in now. Just going to launch early. Very, very simple. He's pulling out and away. Don't even have to bother healing. I'm never going to be making that follow-up strike. Not with torpedo bombers. You can see the reticle narrows very slowly inside of AA still. Follow up with HEDBs. I want to apply a crippling amount of damage. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Break an engine and a flood. Quickly dropping him back down from 24,000 to about 14,000. But he's taking his heal. He kills my Yu Yang. The Yu Yang, however, launched deep water torpedoes and he got temporarily slowed. So if he takes even 1, I think he just dies. He does dodge out on the Yu Yang's torpedoes successfully, which gives an advantage to me. Now I will probably get full tick fires. I have a full HEDB squadron. Looks like he's already taking a fire from somebody. Not a perfect first pass, but that's fine. 3 bomb hits for 7.3k, and that Z52 fire does take him down and clean up the game. Nice, clean Midway game. So, pretty good showing, but fairly easy matchmaking. As you can see, I kind of did lean on the torpedo bombers this game just to make sure I got some good mileage out of the new buffed torpedoes. Definitely a pretty good noticeable difference in terms of damage, especially if you spam them out like I did. 195,000 damage, just shy of 196 this time. 30 torpedo hits, 17 bomb strikes, 6 incaps, 1 kill, 9 fires, 5 floods. The flooding chance also seems to have gone up substantially. 1 defended ribbon, 1 assisted capture, 6 spotting ribbons, and 19 rocket strikes. Team score wise, remember most of my damage does come from battleships in spite of the relatively impressive total. Only hit destroyers twice, and only hit cruisers once, so not able to do that much in terms of damage farming, but I did bully this A-ship GK into oblivion. Damage-wise, so over 2 passes we did 38,000 onto that GK. A little less than I estimated based on my numbers, so some of that must have been flooding damage. So before we were doing about 16,000 per pass, so that's 3,200. over 2 passes. We did 2 passes on this guy, we did 3,800, so that's an improvement of 6,000 damage, so roughly a fifth. So yeah, it does translate quite well. That 15% damage bonus, definitely producing that 15% improved damage. As you can, from the damage distributed here, so you can see mostly bullying the 3 GKs. The GK is not exactly an impressive AA platform. Do note that even though I was spamming out torpedoes, we lost more dive bombers than torpedo bombers. This is of course because we're attacking less thorny AA targets with the torpedo bombers, and they have that access to that heal, which is why you should really emphasize putting extra HP onto your dive bombers. The dive bombers have a lot more damage potential, but because they lack that heal, do tend to be a fair bit more fragile in comparison. If you look at the damage distribution, a lot of alpha damage from the torpedoes when you can get those vulnerable battleships as your primary targets who don't or can't really maneuver against the torpedo bombers. You can get some devastating results. More typically though, the damage will be much closer between bombs and torpedoes. But yeah, with this buff to the Midway torpedo bombers, definitely noticed a marked improvement in terms of torpedo alpha, and the Midway goes from having about 2.5 squadrons to somewhere closer to having 3 squadrons, maybe 2.8-ish. The Midway torpedo bombers of course remain somewhat limited. They're only viable against heavy and sluggish targets. Against any faster cruisers, you're gonna, like that Henry IV, you're gonna struggle to hit them if they are moving around. If you remember, that first initial strike against that GK was supposed to miss. However, it was supposed to miss some of those torpedoes because there was a Henry IV in the way. However, all he did was simply start his engine and move forward a little bit, and he was easily able to dodge out. Now, they weren't going to actually arm on the Henry IV, but I guess he didn't realize that. So he moved out of the way and ended up giving me a perfect strike. Before we go, just a quick overview of my Midway Captain build. Haven't changed anything really. Just the core 9 points. I'm using Ovechkin in order to get a little more HP into my planes. And after my core 9 points, take plane speed, demolition expert, last gasp, and concealment expert to bring down the Midway's massive surface detection. It's 13.8 after concealment expert, so you can imagine before concealment expert it's quite crippling upgrade wise. Fairly straightforward. Plane upgrade, TBM1 to get extra aim time on torpedo bombers, very useful, and then HP onto my dive bombers because again they don't have access to the heal. Flight control module to get a little more deck space and increase regen time, and then aircraft modification 2 to just increase health for all plane types. I find health to be preferable to speed. The bonus is bigger on health anyway. Anyhow, that will be that for this quick Midway review. Post buff, some nice buffs for the Midway. Definitely brings her closer in line to the Hakuryu, and the Audacious still lags a little bit behind in my opinion. But Midway, definitely a very solid jack of all trades choice. If you had to pick one tier 10 carrier to try and do everything in, Midway is definitely the one for the job. Haku's still a little better for competitive, Audacious is still a little better for purely damaging light targets. But certainly, the Midway has always held her own as a slightly easier to use but slightly weaker carrier, and now with the buff, she does feel a little bit stronger. So some good improvements. So I wish you best of luck out there, clapping poor battleships with your newly improved Midway torpedo bombers, and I'll catch you all later. Cheers.